Hi everybody. This is the oddest thing I've ever done, but it's a nice way to spend a Thursday afternoon. You're all very welcome. I see plenty of people online, and I hope you can hear me. I'm seeing if the delay is me looking down, just to make sure there is sound, but there's no video. Is the message that's coming through. Hello, can you see me? Super. Hi, everybody. So delighted to join you for this webinar. I'd like to thank Gerald and Linda at Waterford Chamber for hosting this. We just felt that this might be something of benefit this week, particularly at this, I suppose, unusual time for all of us. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you a little bit of an introduction, tell you how this is going to operate, and then we'll move into the questions and answers phase. So first off, I'm joined during the webinar by Linda. As you can see, she's online. Over the last 24 hours, we've given people the opportunity to message in their questions and challenges that they're facing. So what we're going to do is work our way through those. However, that's not to say that you might have some questions yourself that are, coming up today as things are changing. And you can all see that you've been obviously messaging on the text bar, so you're more than welcome to type in some questions that you might have as we work through these. I'm not promising I can answer them all. We'll certainly take them into account, and I would suggest that we probably have a follow-up session or some kind of email out if there's anything that needs to be clarified. And also just to say, I'm a HR consultant, I'm not an employment lawyer, and I am just trying to give you some practical tips here this afternoon as to how maybe you can deal with this challenging time in your particular workplace. Okay, so if everybody's okay with that, I'm going to get started. I'm seeing somebody called Susan, can't hear anything. If you maybe mute your volume button, maybe that might help, Susan. Apart from that, that's about the height of my IT tips at the moment, sorry. So where are we at today? We're in what's called the delay phase, and the government are, I suppose, handling the coronavirus through this delay phase at this stage. And that's when it's clear that the virus is ingrained and it's beginning to spread. So what we're hearing today is how the government is going to aim to slow the pace of spread to prevent the health service, I suppose, from being swamped by serious cases all at one time. The final stage, just to, what happens next, is the mitigation stage, and that's only instigated if the disease itself is spreading uncontrollably. So let's hope that if we all work together as citizens that we can help stay within the delay phase and get out the other side of it. A lot of businesses are already implementing plans within the delay phase, actually even before it was announced today, allowing people work from home, cancelling training events, and also not having face-to-face meetings. In fact, today I'm sitting in the Waterford Marine Search and Rescue Centre, where Waterford Chamber Skillnet held a training programme, and some of the delegates underwent the training by way of virtual cameras and so on, and I believe it went really, really well. So it's great to see this. As I said, over the last 24 hours, we've allowed you send in some questions and challenges, and I'm going to start maybe getting Linda to ask a couple of those, and let's see where it gets us.
Thanks, Ria, and thank you everybody for joining us this afternoon. So we'll go straight to it, and thank you for sending in your questions. The first question we have: what options are open to parents of children who need to be at home now that the schools will be closed?
Okay, so as you know, the announcement is from today, creches, schools, colleges are going to close, so I'm sure that's a challenge for many of you who have children, or many of the employees within the companies, the businesses they're involved in who have children. Some of the options, I suppose, available are the idea of remote working. But, you know, just to say, if I'm working from home and it's exactly that, I'm not childminding, I'm actually working. So it's about how are you going to figure out that? One of the ideas would be that if you could agree set working hours with employees, so while at home, if there's, you know, maybe another parent in the house, another family member who can help out with the childcare, that you agree the set hours when the employee actually is doing their work and not childminding, and that could work quite well. That could be a very early start or evening time work, whenever they are able to do so. You know, also, I suppose with children being at home, is there ways where if they're not working from home and you do need them at work, due to the type of work that they do and so on, can you allow some staggered working hours, so early or later starts? And actually we'll talk a little bit about the benefits of that, of having less people physically in the workplace during this time could offer you. You could offer some compressed working hours, so they would come in and do a long day and then not be there the next day and so on. Or a shorter working week. There is options, if it's not feasible for that employee to come to work, that they would take annual leave, that you'll allow an unpaid special leave for these circumstances, or that they take parental leave, which again is unpaid. Now I'm talking about here that your business is running as normal, your employee has the challenge of having children at home, and they're coming to you saying, what options do we have? Does anyone have any comments or questions on that particular answer or that particular issue? Well, payment from the government wouldn't apply in relation to somebody working, coming into work, or remote working. So I do have another question that Linda's going to ask, where you may have to reduce their hours, and we might get to that then in a second. Maeve, hopefully that answers that. Any other questions?
Yeah, Ria, I'll jump to that question if you want. So we may need to reduce our staff hours due to reduced business. How do we do this?
Okay. So there's a couple of things that you can do here. First of all, if you envisage that you're going to have to reduce hours because of a loss of business and, you know, things are a bit quieter, there is a government support known as short-term work support that is available. And so to kind of, I suppose you're talking about here where somebody's working 3 days or less per week, having previously worked full-time, okay, or that they're going to temporarily have a standard working week reduced, or the pattern of the days that they work. So what you need to do is download the government form UP14. You can fill in the details of that, and then you would give that to the employee. Now, I know I had a question about, you know, what happens with these forms where, you know, you don't want people going in, queuing up in social welfare offices at the moment, at a time where we're told to kind of reduce meeting up in mass numbers. So there is a way that you can actually post it in. You know, you download the form, complete it and post it in, and then there is payments available. It is means tested and it is based on PRSI stamps, etc. But that's your first option if you are facing a challenge at the moment where you think, look, I'm not going to need somebody 5 days a week, and maybe week to week over the next few weeks, that you're uncertain as to how this will fare out for you. The other option, I suppose, that I know we were asked about this, is what happens if you have to lay people off. It's very similar. You know, you would be entitled to for people to not be at work temporarily for the next couple of weeks. And again, there is government payments available for that. I suppose in that situation, you'd be looking at, it is called officially a layoff, and there is job seekers benefit in place for that. Just a question there on, does this apply if going 3 days or less, say from 5 to 3? Oh, sorry about that, the screen just went. So somebody who's part-time and going from, do you mean that they would now work 3 days and they would be reduced down to less than 3 days, Colin? Just waiting for the messages to come in. Yeah, the short time support is somebody who's working full time and you're going to reduce their working week, for example, from 5 to 3 days or less. But it would be, I would say at this stage, I would say that you're going to find this flexibility in the supports that are being provided. And while there's rules in place at the moment for, you know, this is short-term working, these are layoffs, you know, what we have seen is the government are suggesting people work from home, and if not, that they can look at alternatives. Is there a delay in receiving money from the payment? Not that I'm aware of, because what they have said this week, for example, with the sick leave benefit is where it was, as you've probably seen, where you were out sick and certified for greater than 5 days, getting into the 6th day, that they've reduced those. So I'd imagine they're going to have to process this quite quickly. Again, you'd imagine they're putting the resources in place from social welfare in order to be able to process these multiple claims that are probably going to come in over the next few weeks.
Ria, I might jump in with the next question there, just while we're waiting on people to finish their time.
Oh, I just see one there. How many weeks? Yeah, there's just one question there, Linda. How many weeks can you implement short-time working for? It's normally over a period of 4 weeks. But again, as I'm, you know, and that's if it's consecutively working for 4 weeks. But I think a lot of the rules on this are going to have to be relaxed, depending on how long, you know, we're in either the delay or the mitigation stages of the government's plans. Sorry, Linda, you wanted to ask another question?
That's all right, yeah, just moving to the next question. We have decided to close our workplace. What are our options?
So you've decided to close the workplace. Sorry, Gerald just put something there about the payment. Yeah.
So we're closing the business. What are our options?
So if you're closing the workplace at the moment, okay, you must pay your employees to be at home, because now that's if it's purely your decision to close your workplace. So employees can apply for social welfare payments if you're going to lay them off, okay. So what I would say is, if you feel you have no choice but to close, then I would apply the forms. I would fill in the forms for a layoff period.
And then for those who have decided to ask their employees to work remotely,
yes,
what are our responsibilities?
Okay, so I suppose if somebody is working remotely, it's more the practical side of, you know, do you have a policy in place and do you apply it to everybody? have you risked, like normally if you allow people work remotely, they're working from home, you have an agreed workspace within their home, you've risk assessed it, and I suppose at this stage, considering this is happening so quickly, that's not going to have happened. What I would think you would need to do in particular is to be very careful about the company documentation and company equipment that people are possibly going to bring home with them and have them lying around the house, and your kind of your data protection, your GDPR breaches that are possibly in place or at play there. So it's, you know, what is your policy? Have you updated your employees? Have you communicated it? Are they aware of, you know, the fact that they need to be very security aware of company property, company documentation? Are they recording their working hours, and what way have you decided to get them to do that? You know, do you have a remote access time and attendance system? Is it a straightforward spreadsheet? Have you agreed, again, if you go back to the first question, if it's somebody working remotely who has childcare requirements as well, have you agreed with them what their official working hours are when they are at home? Just in answer to that, if you have to lay off, do you have to pay redundancy? You only pay redundancy in a layoff situation if an employee counterclaims after a 4-week period and says, because you're telling me you have no work for me, I wish to now apply for a redundancy payment. In the circumstances at the moment, it's so unusual. You know, it's, listen, yes, I do have work for you. It's just you can't, you know, be at work. We can't have you at work at the moment because whatever reason our business is suffering, or so I would say at this point, no, you wouldn't need to consider redundancy. And you might clarify your question on somebody on a fixed term contract, just what's the particular question in relation to them as well there, just that question that's coming in.
Thanks, Ria. While Anna's doing that, just moving on, I'm seeing some companies being broken into teams with a weekly rotating schedule in the office. One team at home, one team in the office. Is this a good idea?
Yeah, and I suppose what I might do is cover, there was a question that came in about, you know, you need to keep the workplace open, and how are you going to prevent illness? You know, what are you going to do when you have people coming in as normal and they're concerned about the spread? Okay, so. And your question was, Linda, sorry, it was about the working hours, you said?
Sorry, my question was just about the teams. Is
Yes.
it a good idea to rotate the team?
Yeah. So would you think about maybe offering the opportunity, you know, where people work different working hours, so you have less people on site at any given time? So in answer to the question about, is it a good idea to kind of stagger, have one team in 1 week and another? Absolutely, that would help you. If it was feasible for your business, that would help you not have so many people on site at any given time. The other thing I was going to say in answer to that type of question about, you know, we're open, how can we prevent illness? Some of the suggestions would be, okay, people working different hours, so not having everybody on site if feasible all the time or at the same time. Staggering breaks, you know, so making sure that whatever size your break area, your canteen area is, that everybody isn't in there at the same time. Have you thought about just using only one-use cups and cutlery, rather than having to wash them up if you're concerned about you know, them being washed properly and so on. Tea towels, if you have them on site, how are they cleaned? How many times are they being used? What are they being used for? Making sure the bins are being emptied, ensuring you have enough hand soaps on place, paper towels versus hand dryers. Certainly, you know, paper towels would be seen as a better method of drying your hands thoroughly and safely, rather than, and I'm no medical expert, but this is what, over the years, the advice that I've been given about that. Providing employees with sanitizers and their own box of tissues on their desks and throughout the workplace, having them. Consider your office layout, keeping kind of people not as close in contact to each other. Now, I was looking up the guidelines about, when you get into the mitigation stage, and they talk about social interaction. So this is just information that's there. What the guidelines are saying, that if you spend more than 15 minutes face-to-face in contact and within 2 meters of an infected person, then you obviously have a higher chance of picking up a virus from them. So what happens if you don't know that the person has it? Then obviously, you're unsure, but still it's something to consider in terms of the workplaces that are staying open, and just how you're laying out where people are sitting and how they're interacting. And the other thing I would say about workplaces staying open, I'm sure you've all thought of this, is that make sure that employees feel comfortable and supported if they actually can't come to work, or if they need to head home with feeling unwell. And you do need to apply your usual sick pay policies to those employees. So I might just do a little summary at the end of some of the kind of key takeouts away from this, but certainly in terms of staying open at the moment, it's important that people feel comfortable to be able to do that. Okay.
Ria, I have another good question here. Should an employee be claiming expenses while working from home? For example, light, heat, broadband, etc. And how would you handle this?
Yeah, it's a great question. What do I say to this? If it's only temporary, you're kind of seeing it as a gesture of goodwill, that, they're at home, they're using heat and light. Really, unless there's a contractual arrangement in place about reimbursing somebody for using, an at-home office, or for an ongoing remote working relationship, I would say that really what we'd look at is maybe a gesture of goodwill, if it was deemed something that people really felt strongly enough about, I suppose.
Sorry, where it's not possible for an employee to work from home because they don't have the facilities, so workplace or connectivity, will they be covered by the government illness benefit?
No, because it wouldn't be sickness. If you're saying they don't have the facilities, the workspace, connectivity, etc., the choices are that they either work in your workplace and you do your best, to put the methods in place to prevent the spread of illness, or you would have to lay them off, as we talked about earlier.
And what about those that self-isolate? Can they get the illness benefit, or is it just if they're sick?
No, so if you self-isolate, you wouldn't be entitled to the social welfare payment. The only people who are entitled to payment of, we'll say, the specific, social welfare illness benefit, are those who have been informed by a public health doctor that they must self-isolate, so that they would actually have a medical certificate that they would submit to social welfare. And again, all of this can be done online. Their doctor, if somebody's phoning their doctor is saying, look, by the sounds of it, you need to self-isolate, the doctor will complete that form, and it can all be done by post or online. I'm just looking at a couple of questions, Linda, there. I know Anne came back and said, if an employee is on a fixed term contract, say for 6 months, and you don't have enough work for them now, well, really, Anne, you'd be laying the person off for a period of weeks, and as you would a permanent employee if you don't have work for them. I hope that answers your question. And then Gerald has asked, if an employer is concerned about an employee who's been to Cheltenham or any other foreign travel, even if they aren't currently showing symptoms, can the employee be asked to stay at home? Well, that's an interesting one because, as I said a second ago, if a person's been asked to stay at home and self-isolate, the only time it's an official, requirement is where a public health doctor has deemed them requiring to do so. So at the moment, the UK and i.e. Cheltenham isn't listed on the affected places at present. Now, listening to the reports today, they're saying, keep a watchful eye. I think the HSE may well update the UK as one of the affected areas. I'm not sure at this point. However, if you have somebody who, unless they have symptoms, there should be no reason why they wouldn't come to work. Would you offer them the option to work from home? Would you, obviously you're going to have your sanitation guidelines in place in your workplace. The only time, if you ask them to stay at home and they haven't officially been asked to self-isolate, then you must pay that person to be at home. I know one of the questions that came in, we had something about Cheltenham. We also had somebody a person that they house share with has just come back from one of the affected areas, and what would you require them to do? You need them to go and to speak to a public health doctor and to discuss if they have symptoms. But until they're officially told to self-isolate, there isn't, you would require them at work unless you can ask them or allow them work from home. I hope that answers that question. I'm seeing Maeve's one in relation to retail staff, absolutely, that they can't work from home. If we have a staff member diagnosed, then the rest will have to self-isolate. Will they all need a cert to get social welfare officially closed? So you need to be told by the HSE if you are to shut down. So they will be and have been in contact with workplaces. So they will give you guidance, and they will therefore give certs and self-isolation certification to your employees, and they will tell you what to do next. So, and they seem to be very much on top of dealing with that at the moment. And yes, if you are closed for 2 weeks because they have been medically certified to self-isolate, they will be entitled to illness benefit from social welfare. I hope that answers your question.
Ria, just in relation to that, are they looking at it from a sector by sector perspective? We had a question earlier where, obviously people in retail, they're at the cold days, they're the ones that are meeting people. It's probably easier in one sense for offices to close.
Yes,
but so is it sector by sector they'll deal with it?
I know we had some questions in from people in the retail sector who had, I think somebody said they had been at a very good briefing yesterday. So it appears that maybe the bodies representing retail sector are very much on top of it. So I can only answer that I hope that people are getting that type of the right advice. If there's a local contact in the HSE, there's a question. I'm not aware of that, but it's a really good question and maybe something for us to follow up. I'm sure Linda, Gerald could look at that and maybe see if there's somebody. I'm not aware personally myself.
Yeah, we'll look at that, absolutely, and we can send out the details.
Yeah.
I think that's probably it. Now we can nearly wrap up unless anybody else out there has any questions. We do have some other questions, so we're quite happy for people to contact us. They can email me directly, linda.lawton@waterfordchamber.ie, and we can get answers for you in the meantime. But Ria, if you want to wrap up at this point, I think we've covered a lot of ground here today.
Yeah, hopefully people have found it useful just to have a chat through. I suppose my overall advice would be just pull out your contracts, your current contracts of employment and your HR policies. Just have a look around. What are your sick leave policies? Also, what do you have in place there? around remote working, flexible working, always useful just to kind of just bring yourself back up to speed as to what you've committed in print to your employees. I'd also suggest from a practical point of view that you ensure you've up-to-date contact details for all your employees. Consider setting up a temporary texting system or a WhatsApp system. They're quite easy to set up and just handy in the event that, you know, I remember doing that in a previous life do you remember we had the red weather warnings? They're always handy to have in place. And you're getting one message out to everybody, and also just, you know, in case somebody's broadband or Wi-Fi, whatever it is, isn't working, a texting system is quite good. I would also suggest that you consider reviewing your workplace cleaning practices to see if you can enforce some enhanced practices yourselves. You know, little things like just, you know, where's your, you know, where are your bins, how often are they being emptied, you know, because you're going to be encouraging people to, you know, blow their nose, use tissues, put them in the bins, or, you know, I'm sure you've all thought of this type of things, but just, I suppose, and then the other last thing I'd say is if your employees deal with the public, which I know a number of people do, consider how you'd minimise possible exposure, you know, limiting the amount of people on site. I know personally myself, I've been in and out of shops and pharmacies, etc. over the last few days, and people are really good, but there is gangs of people standing at counters, and while people are being asked to, you know, use some of the hand sanitizers, it would be no harm to consider, as I said, limiting the number of people, even if, you know, you have your public reception areas that people come in where you are. I just see one last question there. For layoff due to lack of work, do you follow normal HR procedures, notice periods? Yeah, well, I mean, to be honest with you, normally you'd give like a month's notice for something like this, but taking into account the urgency of the current situations, it's immediate. That's when you're giving notice immediately to try and work through this. So look, I hope that, as I said, it's been helpful. It's been a weird experience. Delighted to do this, and thanks to the guys for setting this up, particularly Brian.
Thanks, Ria. We will post the recording of the session as well tomorrow and send it out to everybody. So thanks for joining us. We'll keep you updated, and we'll use this platform obviously going forward if we have any other information that we want to impart. Similarly, if there are any other experts that you do need advice from, give us the suggestions and we'll see what we can do for you. Thanks again, everybody, and stay safe.
Thank you.